Saraswati Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanandi. Could you sit somewhere where you're not with your back to Prabhupada? Thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continuing, Canto 9, Chapter 2. We'll do a little summary, then we'll chant the verse. We'll chant the verse, then do a summary. That's what we're going to do. Chapter 2. What's the verse number? 9? Yes? Okay. There we go. Tam shashapa kalacharya kritagasam akamataha nakshatra bandhu shudrastvam karmana bhavita muna tam shashapa kuglacharya kritagasam amkamataha nakshatra bandhu shudrastvam karmana bhavita muna. Tam shashapa kulacharya kritagasam kamataha Ladies, please. Tam him prishadra Shushapa cursed Kula Acharya the family priest Vishishta Krita Agasam because of committing the great sin of killing a cow. Akamataha, although he did not want to do it. na, not Kshatrabandhu, the family member of a Kshatriya, Shudra Tvam, you behave like a Shudra, Karmana, therefore, by your fruitive reaction, Bhavita, you shall become a Shudra, Amuna, because of killing the cow. Translation, although Prishadra had committed the sin unknowingly, his family priest Vashishta cursed him, saying, in your next life you shall not be able to become a Kshatriya. Instead, you shall take birth as a Shudra because of killing the cow. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It appears that Vashishta was not free from tamo guna, the mode of ignorance. As the family priest or spiritual master of Prishadra, Vashishta should have taken Prishadra's offense very lightly, but instead Vashishta cursed him to become a Shudra. It is the duty of a family priest not to curse a disciple, but to give him relief through the performance of some sort of atonement. Vashishta, however, did just the opposite. Therefore, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that he was durmati. In other words, his intelligence was not very good. So we'll do the chapter summary, but I'll say some things about this verse first. From the previous chapter, we heard how powerful was Vashishta. Pretty powerful, right? This and that. And he had some communication with the personality of Godhead, who obliged because he's Vashishta, because he's a great Brahmana. Very powerful Brahmana. However, it's despite that power, he did something that a Brahmana, what to speak of an elevated Brahmana, is not to do. So the Kula Guru, that's what's being described here, Kulacharya, or Kula Guru, the Acharya of the family priest, has a responsibility to help the family members become elevated. And supposing something happens that's a mistake or bad, then the Kula Guru or Kula Acharya will find some means for elevation. So, for example, how to counteract the sin for having killed the cow. There are procedures. And not that he's not educated, he's incredible personality, but the powerful Vashishta became overwhelmed by Tamagun, according to the commentary here. And in this way, being influenced by the modes of nature, Tamagun, his intelligence became dur, or bad intelligence. And bad intelligence, where does that come from? Well, where does everything come from? Everything comes from the same source, because there's one source of everything, and then there's details. So the modes of nature operate under the indication of the source of everything. Devi Yeshugunamai Mamamaya Durachaya. So the persons who are influenced by the modes don't understand, because they're covered by the modes. So he has the the Brahmana capacity to approach the Supreme Lord. He also being mixed with the modes of nature sometimes. We know from Bhagavad Gita, one mode will supersede the other modes for some time and then subside. So the prominent mode for the Brahmana is mode of goodness, otherwise he's not a Brahmana. But there's a mix, generally speaking. And that's when it becomes a pure Vaishnava. So he's a Brahmana that's not a pure Vaishnava, and thus there's always the risk that some lower nature may overcome him. And that's what happened. That's what happened. So what's a family priest in Vedic culture? What's a family priest? The family priest has the function of guiding the family members according to their psychophysical nature, their prescribed duties, swadharma, and the purpose of all dharma, including swadharma, is elevation through the modes. In this case, through the modes, through the procedures for connecting one's psychophysical nature with the Supreme, gradually purifying that psychophysical nature such that one no longer has an attraction for being the enjoyer of something out there in the field of Prakriti, no longer an attraction for being the enjoyer of Prakriti. Swadharma is meant for that purpose. So there's different. It's to be customized according to one's position. There are rules according to different modes and different varnas that are indicated by the modes, etc. And the family priest is meant to guide the family members, or any individual, aside from family, any individual, in their prescribed duties. Just yesterday evening, I was giving conducting a class with Chinese devotees, and when in a certain section, Krishna is having a conversation with Sudama Brahmana or Sudama Vipra about the good old days. Do you remember when we were in school together? And he's explaining how the bond of friendship that the two of them have, Krishna and Sudama, came as a result of not just spending time together, but in Gurukula. And it was a short period of time. It was 64 days, and Krishna went back home with his certificate. He had graduated. Pretty extraordinary. But Krishna was speaking to Sudama from the position, it was vacillating or oscillating between the position of friend and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because his friend, Sudama, knew that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, it doesn't say that he knew that when they were going to school, but he knew that because he was not just a learned Brahmana, but he was an exalted Vaishnava. He understood when he was having this conversation with Krishna about the good old days, Krishna was speaking from the position of friend, as in rasa, but at the same time, he's the personality of Godhead. In this particular section that I'm referring to, Krishna is extolling the virtue of service to Guru. It's just connecting with this here, the Kula Guru or Kula Acharya. They had the same teacher. Their teacher was Sandipani Muni. And some detail, according to Gopal Champu, Krishna selected who his teacher would be. It's a detail, it's a nice detail. Krishna was in Vrindavan for almost 11 years. When he went to Mathura, he turned 11. And when he turned 11, Kamsa was already dead, and his parents decided now is time for his receiving mantra, Upanayana, or receiving Gayatri mantras. He received those Gayatri mantras from Gargamuni, the same one that gave the name to Krishna and Balaram, because he was an exalted Brahmana, a perfected soul, Brahmana, living in Mathura. So Gopal Champu, Jiva Goswami writes, Krishna began to consider, I need to go to school. I mean, I don't need to go to school because I already know everything, but to set the right example, it wouldn't be good if I don't go to school, so I have to go to school. It's time to go to school. Which is, Gurukul normally starts young, but in this case, because he was in Vrindavan, acting as a cowherd boy, he hadn't gone to school yet, even before, up to 11 years. So Krishna began to consider who would be a good teacher. According to Gopal Champu, he was considering there's many exalted Vaishnava gurus, starting with Vyasadeva and many others, but because they're Vaishnavas, they'll know that I'm the personality of God, and how can they accept me as a student? So he crossed that one off the list. And then it's mentioned he considered Sandipani Muni, who lived some distance away. The distance, from Mathura to where Sandipani Muni's school was, it's now Ujjain, it's a city in Madhya Pradesh. Then it was named Avanti. Now it's named Ujjain, so that's where his school was, some distance away. So I don't know how he knew about it, other than, I'm looking at Radhakrishna, maybe Radhakrishna has the answer to this. Sandipani Muni's mother was Purnamasi. Who is Purnamasi? For those of you that are a little newer, she's Yogamaya, personified for Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. So she's not just a Vaishnavi, she's Yogamaya. And that was Sandipani Muni's mother. And Sandipani Muni had 2 children, at least 2. 2 that took part in Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. One of them was Madhumangal, Krishna's celebrated friend, Brahmana friend, same age as Krishna. And there was also a daughter named Nandimukhi, and Nandimukhi plays a prominent role in Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. In a moment you'll understand why I'm narrating this. Besides, it's nice to hear Krishna Katha. So the son and daughter and the mother were exalted Vaishnavas, intimately associated with Krishna. Yet Sandipani Muni was not a Vaishnava. And that's why, one of the reasons, why he selected Sandipani Muni. Because he would accept him as a student, because he was a worshipper of Shiva, according to Gopal Champu, and he had realization of Brahman. He didn't have realization of Bhagavan, he wasn't yet a Vaishnava. But Krishna, he'll be a good teacher. He was a celebrated person, so, it's not around the corner to go from Mathura to Ujjain. So he selected, his parents approved, and off he went with Balaram. And so another reason was he wanted to elevate or bring Sandipani Muni to the position of Vaishnavism, in pure Vaishnavism. Now exactly how that worked, it doesn't describe in Gopal Champu, but that's what it describes. In other words, if he has such a mother and has 2 children like his 2 children, he's a devotee, but he's not showing it, and Krishna's bringing it out. So, when Krishna went to school, at the school of Sandipani Muni, one of his classmates was Sudama. So, as young boys, he is from a Brahmin family, Sudama. Krishna is from a Kshatriya family, But the guru doesn't make those distinctions. They were just students, spirit souls meant for him to develop the Brahminical character, or quality character, the quality of a great soul, quality of a good student. Samma Dhammaktapakshocham, or same as Amanityam Badam Vidvam, qualities of one who's situated in knowledge. That was his job, that was his service. And in the course of their 64 days together, they underwent some difficulties. Life has difficulties, even if you're Krishna. And after, just going to the point, after they completed their school, Krishna went back to Mathura. And something like 50, 60 years, whatever it was, later, Sudama, 56 years after they were students together, Sudama comes to visit Krishna in Dwarka by little prodding from his good wife to go visit Krishna. So when he visits Krishna, many things happen. Krishna treats him like an respected brahmana by a kshatriya, and he worships him literally. It's like deity worship. He worshipped him. And then they sat down together, and the mood changed, and Krishna is saying, remember the good old days. So he's extolling the virtue of service to Guru, which is where it connects with this verse. And Krishna says there are three categories of gurus. It's not this usual category listing that we find. But one is the father. Another is one who gives mantra, and with mantra, how to perform rituals, which is like what Gargamuni did. And the third category of guru is one who teaches about me, paradharma, as opposed to swadharma. So Vishishta has knowledge of transcendence, but he's performing the function of the swadharma guru. So Krishna says, of the three, the one that's most dear to me, in fact, I am not different than him, is the one who teaches paradharma, or one who teaches about me. Now, Sandipani Muni did all three. He did two of the three. He wasn't the biological father. But he also taught procedures. He didn't give the mantra, but he taught the procedures in worship and taught the 64 limbs of the Vedas, one per day. And the graduation ceremony was in the 65th day. So, in the course of that discussion, Krishna says the one who is teaching Swadharma, he teaches, this is just a little detail on the occupational duties according to the nature of the student. The occupational duties, according to the nature of the student, come after there's a foundation for good quality and good character. I'll say it again. The details, the guru's function, the Kula guru's function, is to give fundamental training in good character to everyone. All the students under the care of that teacher. And there's, in Prabhupada's explanation of this function, there's 2 or 3 items he would repeat again and again and again to okay. So one is humble and submissive service to the teacher. And samatpani is the phrase from the Upanishads. It means going and gathering wood, which is what Krishna and Sudama were given the service to do by Sudama's, by Sandipani Muni's wife, go gather firewood. So they went together. Just menial service, menial service, menial service, menial service. And what happens to the fruits of that menial service? Belongs to Guru. The wood goes to Guru, and the Guru does with whatever the fruit of that service is. Commonly, Prabhupada would speak about accepting alms. In the classic sense of a teacher, a Vedic teacher, he doesn't get a salary, he doesn't get a stipend. There's not tuition for the students to enroll in the teacher school. So how did the school go on? The students would go here and there on occasion and accept alms on behalf of the teacher. I mean, those that are familiar with Prabhupada's teachings, you know all of what I'm saying, but he said it so many times. There was a purpose for him repeating it. When the student would go gather alms, what would happen to those alms? What happens to the fruit of the activities of the student? It goes to the teacher. The teacher gives it to his wife. The wife prepares the meal. The food is offered to the Supreme Lord, and the teacher calls the student for the meal. And an essential point was, in his repeated explanation, if the teacher forgets or whatever, doesn't call the student, they fast. They don't go say, hey, what's going on? We gathered all this stuff and you didn't feed us. What's going on? None of that. So the simplicity of heart, that whatever I do as a student, it's the property of the teacher. And he can do with me what he likes. So the idea is when the little boy grows up, he's going to have an occupation, most likely. And whatever that occupation is, it's not his property. The fruit is not his property because he learned it. The foundation was there, and everything belongs to the teacher. So now later on in life, supposing he becomes a grahasta, and supposing as the young boy, the teacher, after building the foundation of good character and good qualities, etc., and humility and simplicity and sacrifice unto the teacher, when that foundation is there, the teacher will then see he has this propensity or that propensity or the other propensity in terms of activity. And he, the teacher, would give resources to nourish this propensity or that propensity and then grow it. Or if he found that the student has a propensity different than what my skills are to nourish their propensities, he would turn them over to another teacher after the foundation was established, because that's the first business. So it's the Kula Guru, or here Kula Acharya, to indicate to the student or the family member, this I'm observing is your nature, and here are some resources to facilitate that nature. He would train how to do X, Y, Z, depending upon the nature. So now, supposing there's some principle, in this case, some principle that's been violated, some adharma has been done, intentionally or unintentionally. In this case, specifically, it's unintentionally. Akamataha means he did not want to do it. He killed the cow, but he didn't want to kill the cow. We'll hear the chapter summary shortly. He killed the cow, but not intentionally. And he woke up in the morning and he found that he had killed the cow. He felt terrible. So his Kula Guru, or the Swadharma Guru, should have said, this is very bad. The procedure to atone for this sin is fill in the blank. And he knows what that procedure is. Now, I'm going to go over, on third base, and something came in yesterday evening from a devotee in some other part of the country saying he had a conversation with a Christian friend, and the Christian friend was saying, only Christ, it's not in the Vedas anywhere, he searched, it's not in the Vedas anywhere, where one can get the kind of forgiveness that Christ gave. Therefore, Christ consciousness is superior to Krishna consciousness, because of the forgiveness propensity or capacity of Christ. So become a Christian. It was like a conversion argument, or I'm better than you argument. Is that true? No, it's not true. The language is very clear. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha yashyami ma suchaha. It's right in Bhagavad Gita, so I don't know why this devotee didn't know how to answer. But papa means sin, and becoming freed from sin is explicitly described. Now there's a condition. What's the condition? Surrender unto me. Now supposing there's the forgiveness of Christ, and I say I'm a Christian because Christ is very forgiving, and I go on doing the sinful activity with that caveat that Christ will forgive me. That's another sin. According to our Vedic teaching, sinning on the strength of chanting is most heinous. So there, right here, there's procedures for atonement, prayaschitta. And there's one prayaschitta that covers all prayaschitas or atonements or the forgiveness for some wrongdoings, knowing or unknowing. And that's surrender to Krishna. But there's abundant, oppressively abundant procedures for atoning. We discussed it 2 evenings ago, where for householders there's nitya karma, there's a daily action for atoning for just existing as a householder. Existing as a householder means unknowingly, when cooking, there's living entities that get killed, germs or whatever get killed from the fire. When drinking water from a vessel, there's germs that may be killed by your drinking water from a vessel. When sweeping the floor, there may be living entities that are harmed by your sweeping the floor. Unknowingly, you're not sweeping the floor to kill living entities, but unknowingly it may happen, so what to do? So there's a procedure, daily procedure for householders, and it's called Pancha Yagya. And you do that, and so Pancha Yagya is this is a detail from the 1866 Bhagavad Gita verse. Those are superseded by one thing, Mamekam Sharanam. So that Nitya, according to our Acharya's commentary on that verse, there's daily Nitya karmas, and there's occasional Naimittika karmas, sometimes and sometimes. And both are for elevation and purification. So certainly Vashishta knows, because he's the Kula Acharya. But he didn't say, nor did he say, just take shelter of the personality of Godhead. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo. He didn't say that. I curse you. What's that? It's tamagun. He's there for protection and elevation. He's not the Kshatriya kind of protection. He's the scriptural kind of protection. And the sin of killing the cow is a sin. It's the behavior of a Sudra, so you won't become a Kshatriya in your next life, you become a Shudra in your next life. So there. That's not the business of a teacher, shaking a stick and whacking somebody with a stick. That's not the function. But that's what this verse is. For us, it's pretty simple. Leaving aside all that interesting history and details and teachings. Just surrender to Krishna. And what happens when you surrender to Krishna? Besides no sinful reaction, you go to Krishna. And in case you have a doubt, masuchaha. No doubt. Now, we're not very elevated personalities, most of us at least. So we're little people. And how to understand all this? You know, it's not so easy to understand. There's details and details. Stay on board, and you'll start to understand. How do you start to understand? By purification. Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki. The primary purification is by hearing, like what we're doing. And it's not just for some stretch of time, it's for our life. And we, in a sustained manner with faith here, then purification happens just by the sound vibration, more or less depending upon our attentiveness to the sound vibration and our application of that sound vibration, and the faithfulness that we have in our heart towards that sound vibration and the source of that sound vibration, Krishna. But purification comes, and then we can start to understand things in finer detail than, just the big, the big bold statement, surrender unto me and everything is going to be taken care of. It's true. And then the refinement of how it's true becomes more revealed. And so stay on board, continue hearing, continue becoming purified, continue to get realizations. There's a really nice section where Krishna is speaking to the 20,000 kings that he liberated from Jarasanda's prison, and they want to know, there's like, before we were just wanting out of this prison, now we besides we're already out of the prison, we understand that was just salvationism, and we don't want just salvationism. We want one thing, one request. Please give us the means to always remember you. Cool. So Krishna says, here's the means. I promise you. He doesn't say, ma suchaha, he says, ma vaishta. It's his vow. He takes a vow to them. You will get to this stage. You will get to this stage. And he gives them the means to get to that stage. And it's by regular practice. So we have the same promise, masuchaha, regular practice. And it's not just for a stretch of time, a few months or a few years. It's our life, the means of purifying to the point where the mind is fixed on Krishna. It's now fixed on many things, and the stage by maturity will come where it's fixed on Krishna. With faithful and consistent and prolonged practice. So now the chapter summary. Prabhupada writes in the chapter summary, step back from what's going on. What's going on is Canto 9 is leading to Canto 10. And Canto 9 is describing, from the beginning, the lineage of the Sun Dynasty, and then it's already started to blend to the Moon Dynasty, and Krishna appears in the Moon Dynasty. So in the Sun Dynasty, Ramachandra appears in the Sun Dynasty of kings. The Sun Dynasty, as was mentioned, say it again, Sun Dynasty starts with the Sun God, and from the Sun God, his son, Manu, Vaivasvata Manu, and from his son, Ikshvaku. And Vaivasvata Manu built the city of Ayodhya and requested his son, his eldest son, Ikshvaku, to rule. in Ayodhya. So he did. And Ramachandra appears in that dynasty. So that comes later in the 9th canto. But there's a changeover from the Sun dynasty to the Moon dynasty, and that leads into telling Krishna's pastimes in the 10th canto. The 9th canto precedes the 10th canto because it's a Purana. It's history. It's real history. These gender-changing events and so forth, it's real history. No, it's not within our experience. How do we know it really happened? We know on the authority of Shastra. That's how we know. That's the best means of knowing. Shastra Praman. Best means of knowing. So here, we're going back to the descendants of sun god, Vivaswan, and the descendants of Vaivasvata Manu. So remember, Vaivasvata Manu had a son that became a woman that became a man. And then back and forth 1 month each. And that's where this ends. The second chapter describes the dynasties of the sons of Manu, headed by Kurusha. Paragraph. So Dyumna accepted the order of Vanaprastha and departed for the forest. That's how the previous chapter ended. Vaivasvata Manu, being desirous of sons, plural, worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead and consequently begot 10 sons, like Maharaj Ikshvaku, all of whom were like their father. One of these sons, Prishadra, was engaged in the duty of protecting cows at night, with a sword in his hand, following the order of his spiritual master, Vishishta, right? Following the order of his spiritual master, he would stand in this way for the entire night. Once, in the darkness of night, the tiger seized a cow from the cowshed, and when Prashadra came to know, he took a sword in his hand and followed the tiger. Unfortunately, when he finally approached the tiger, he could not distinguish between the cow and the tiger in the dark, and thus he killed the cow. Because of this, his spiritual master cursed him to take birth as a Shudra in a Shudra family, but Prashadra practiced mystic yoga, and in Bhakti Yoga he worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then he voluntarily entered a blazing forest fire, thus relinquishing his material body and going back home, back to Godhead. Kijai. Now, there's an elaborate discussion in Chaitanya Charitamrita between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sanatana Goswami, where giving up your life in this way isn't result in going back to Godhead. Mahaprabhu argues or reasons that if it were so a million times, I would have given up my life. But that's not the method. In fact, Prabhupada explains, according to law in India at least, if someone tries to commit suicide and it's unsuccessful, they're taken to jail for attempted murder because he doesn't have the right, even his own body. Interesting, huh? It's sin. So by God's law, it's sin. By conventional law, at least in India, it's a crime. So how was it that he went back to Godhead? By entering a fire. I don't have an explanation. I have questions, but not answers. So you can ask the question that my answer is, I'm not sure. I thought to research it, but I didn't yet. So the rest of the introduction is other sons and their sons and some incidents that's found in this chapter 2. So he had 10 sons. Ikshvaku is mentioned. Kavi, the youngest son of Manu, was a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead from his very childhood. From Manu's son, known as Karusha, a sect of Kshatriyas known as Kurushas was generated. That's Now, 3 so far. Manu also had a son known as Drishta, from whom another sect of Kshatriyas was generated. But although they were born of one who had the qualities of a Kshatriya, they became Brahmanas. Now there's mention of this in a writing by Bhaktisiddhanta, where there's a whole list of scriptural examples where persons born in this Varna became that, or that Varna became another, and so Varna is determined by quality, this little essay is explaining, not by birth. There is a correlation, traditionally, between birth and qualification. But if one has a qualification of something other, then one should be designated according to the something other. Okay, here we go. From Nriga, another son of Manu, came the sons and grandsons known as Sumati, Bhuta Jyoti, and Vasu. From Vasu, in succession, came Pratika, and from him came Oghavan. Another son is named Narishyanta, descending in order from the seminal dynasty of Narishyanta. Another son of Manu were Chitrasena Riksha, Midvan Purna, Indrasena, Vitihotra, Satyashrava, Urushrava, Devadatta, and Agni Vesha. Bhaktitirtha Swami named one of his disciples Agni Vesha. Maybe some of you know him. Nice devotee. Lives in Chicago. That's where his name comes from. From the Kshatriya, known as Agni Vesha, came the celebrated Brahmana dynasty known as the Agni Veshyayana. Another son named Dishta came Nabhaga, and from him in succession came so it gives us more list of sons and their sons and their sons and more sons. So I'm not going to read it all. It's a description of the descendancy of the Sun dynasty into this world, and sons of Manu and their sons and so forth. So it spread widely. And in Ikshvaku's line is where Ramachandra appeared, so that's coming. And then a lot of attention goes to Ramachandra, within this 9th canto. Hare Krishna. Any discussion? Yes. Button?
If there is, what is the difference between Christ consciousness and Krishna consciousness?
What's the difference between God consciousness and Krishna consciousness? That's the question?
Yes, sir. Christ consciousness.
Christ consciousness. Well, there's lots of sameness and there's some difference. But you're asking the differences.
If there is a difference, I was asking, is there
You'd like
one?
to hear the samenesses too.
Okay, that's what
Okay, sure. It's nicer to talk about the samenesses. There are differences. But the sameness, this, referring to Srila Prabhupada, he had an interaction with some Franciscan monks somewhere in Australia, a monastery, and he was invited, and they had a 2-hour discussion, and it was they loved the discussion because Prabhupada was speaking of the points of similarity, the sameness. And in that sameness discussion, there's one Supreme, and that one Supreme is to be worshipped through the representative of that one Supreme, or representatives. God is approached through the representative or representatives of the Supreme. So that's that is the sameness. And, there's subtleties to all of this, but, and selfless service, where one places the interest in the Supreme above the interest of oneself. In fact, oneself becomes the servant of the Supreme. That's a sameness. No, the language is different. That's okay. The principle is the same. Service to the Supreme and compassion. In service to the Supreme, the basis of service to the Supreme is all living entities, not just in the human form, all living entities are parts of the Supreme, and therefore they're to be honored and respected and treated with respect. Tolerance. Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, text 8 through 12. Items of knowledge, they're the same. Items of knowledge are the same. That's the sameness. So, a distinction, there's several. One of those distinctions is disciplic succession. Prior to Christ, how did disciplic succession become established? After Christ, it just follow. But one hears from one who has heard from. That's the principle of disciplic succession. It's not strong and well defined in Christianity. Therefore, so many different interpretations of what Christ said, as well as what Christ meant, and how to apply it. In the absence of disciplic succession, things get distorted. For example, animals have no soul. Prabhupada met with a cardinal from the Catholic Church. Excuse me. He met with a cardinal from the Catholic Church and asked the cardinal, "Why do you eat meat?" And the answer was, because animals have no soul. Prabhupada question, where's that in the Bible? The Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill." You're killing. They're not killing because the animals have no soul. So, when disciplic succession is not intact, then teachings can become distorted. So that's a distinction. Another distinction is, while the sameness is accepting that God is a person, a distinction is there's elaborate, detailed description of the personal feature of the Supreme. In fact, various forms of the Supreme and their personal features, their names, their qualities, etc., etc. The details of that personal God, or Supreme person. Details and details. Further, details of rasa, or the mellows of love when engaged in service, besides the feature of reverence, because God is good and God is great, therefore reverential love, and the medium of service to God through the medium of reverential love. It's not described in detail, but in essence it's quite similar. But there are further rasas that are revealed in Krishna bhakti or Krishna devotion. There's further differences. Here's some further differences. The form that Bhagavan has is not material. That is a distinction that's very important in Krishna worship as opposed to Christ consciousness. Because when it's not understood, then we have some problems where someone may think, well, they think wrong things without a list of what the wrong things might be. That's a good list.
No, thank you. I love hearing that because growing up in a Christian household, playing the piano in church and helping people worship, one thing that I have learned educating myself now is that kind of what you said, we have more similarities
Oh, yeah.
than differences. And I think what we all see now is that we're arguing and fighting over the same belief at the end of the day.
Two things. Again and again, Prabhupada would speak against the designation-ness of this religion, that religion, based upon a bodily conception of this religion, that religion. Like this person that was sending this, or having this conversation with a friend or co-worker or something. You know, Christianity is better than Krishna consciousness because I'm better than you are. So, you know, we shouldn't do the same thing. We can have some idea that there's some distinction in Krishna Bhakti and feel grateful, but also at the same time respectful. When that respect that's resting upon the fundamental monotheism, we'll call it, or that God is the supreme person, and our lives are meant for His service. Emphasize that. But when one doesn't do that, it becomes political and divisive, and that's unfortunate. Prabhupada didn't feel that without details. He wrote against it. He spoke against it. The previous acharyas wrote against it, spoke against it, etc. But it comes as a result of strengthening bodily identification, and then groupism follows from that. I said 2 points. The second point is not just Christianity and Christ consciousness, but within Vaishnavism, there's differences. There's samenesses, and there's differences. And Shri Shri Radha Leela Madhava Ki. Particularly, Prabhupada's spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta made it a major part of his work to show the unity. He spoke about it, he wrote about it, acknowledging the differences. Here's some differences. Here's the sameness. And the essence of sameness should be respected, which he did, and tried to expand or spread that message. The sameness is what's important amongst Vaishnava groups, but sometimes Vaishnava groups get into the same groupism. Our group is better than your group. It happens. And it's not necessary. Especially when the fundamental principle of respect is there. Just like in dealing with different species of life. Respect should be there. You don't go and embrace a tiger, but you respect the living entity that's within, and you behave in an appropriate manner. You don't exploit and don't be exploited. Anything else? Yes?
I was just curious how Manu Mangal got to Vrindavan.
How did he end up there?
Yeah.
He came with his grandmother. Purnamasi was his grandmother. Before Krishna appeared, Purnamasi knew, because she's Yogamaya personified, that Krishna was going to appear. And so she went to Vrindavan prior to Krishna's appearance, and with her came her grandson, Madhu Mangal. No, it means Madhu Mangal is a little bit older, doesn't say how old, a little bit older, close to the same age as Krishna. And by her mere presence, she, Purnamasi, was respected by everybody. But she just had that Shakti and that position of garnering the respect of everyone. And that enabled her, that respect enabled her to orchestrate Krishna's pastimes. Aside, as part of her potency, to orchestrate Krishna's pastimes. That's how Madhu Mangal got there. Want to hear another one? Sure. What happened when Krishna left to Madhu Mangal? What happened when Krishna left? What happened when Krishna left is Madhu Mangal went back to his father. It doesn't say what happened with Purnamasi, but this is in Rupa Goswami's writings, Lalita Madhava, that the story with Sandipani Muni, when Krishna was graduating, what Guru Dakshin would you like? And what did his teacher say? My son died. Can you find him and bring him back? Who was that son? Madhu Mangal. Lalita Madhava confirms. That son was Madhu Mangal. Huh? He was taken by a demon named Panchajanya. Panchajanya was hanging out in a conch shell, big conch shell, and he came from the sea and swallowed Madhu Mangal. You can read in the Krishna book. You'll get some more details. But you asked about how did Madhu Mangal get there, so he also left. And that was part of another pastime of Krishna outside of Vrindavan. So when he brought Madhu Mangal back, Sandipani Muni said, you want to know what else you would like me to do? That's having a disciple such as you is the full payment of my Guru Dakshin. You may go back to your home. It's really nice. It's very sweet. He had become what Krishna wanted him to become, a pure Vaishnava by his association. Anything else? The Srimad Bhagavatam is so wonderful. It's wonderful because in many ways it's more intriguing than any fiction story, Harry Potter story or Sherlock Holmes story, it's just so fascinating, and it brings one to the potency is to bring one's attention to Krishna. So, may you all have a life of reading Srimad Bhagavatam very happily and become Krishna conscious in a very natural, transcendental way. But you're here for building a good foundation, so do that first. Build your good foundation so you can contribute to the world's revival of Krishna consciousness. And Srimad Bhagavatam will be right by your heart, I'm sure. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.